summer of 1873, four men, Heinrich, Wilhelm Friedrich, and Gustav Kellner, disembarked from the merchant vessel, Bremen's Pride, at the port of Savannah, Georgia. Identical in every visible detail, they were so indistinguishable that their mother Margareta had resorted to secretly marking scars behind their ears just to tell them apart. What followed their arrival would unsettle the city and confound law enforcement for over a year. Eyewitnesses began reporting sightings of the same man in multiple locations, at the same time conducting business across Savannah, while simultaneously being seen miles apart. The sheriff's office gathered 43 sworn testimonies describing these impossible encounters. When the truth finally emerged, it was so disturbing that the authorities chose to suppress the findings to prevent mass hysteria. The methods the brothers used were so psychologically jarring and ethically ambiguous that no scientific institution dared to study them. Their coordinated deception exposed a terrifying truth about how easily perception can be manipulated. Before diving deeper into the Kellner mystery, make sure to subscribe for more true crime and dark historical tales. And let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Your stories fuel our investigations. Back in 1873, Savannah was still recovering from the destruction of Sherman's March. The city was cautiously optimistic about its future, especially when European merchants like the Kellners arrived with money and apparent business acumen. The family presented themselves as Bavarian traders, looking to establish import ventures in the post-war South. Klaus Kellner, the patriarch, spoke fluent English with a trace of a German accent and came with glowing letters from German trading houses. His wife Margaret remained in the background, quietly managing the household. The four sons, all 27, claimed to be business partners. The family settled in a well-appointed home on Bull Street and quickly embedded themselves into Savannah's merchant class. Klaus joined local business associations and cultivated ties with cotton traders, shipping agents, and warehouse owners. To the public, the Kellners seemed like exactly what the city needed, foreign investors with capital and connections. But beneath their respectable image, there was something deeply unsettling. The four brothers were not just similar, they were exact replicas. Same height, same build, same pale blue eyes and wheat-colored hair. Even their mannerisms and speech patterns were mirror images. At social gatherings, they unnerved people. Mrs. Victoria Hammond, wife of a leading cotton merchant, noted that they would finish each other's sentences and nod in unison as if performing a well-rehearsed play. The brothers adapted to Savannah's business world with uncanny ease. Within weeks, they had relationships with every major firm in town. Heinrich handled finance and banking. Wilhelm took care of shipping logistics, Friedrich worked social angles, and Gustav oversaw correspondence and records. Their efficiency was astounding, but so was their knowledge. They knew which merchants were in debt, which families were having money troubles, and which officials were susceptible to influence. Jonathan Whitfield, a respected cotton factor, grew suspicious. Heinrich, he noted, spoke about local markets as though he had been studying them for years, not weeks. The deeper Savannah welcomed the Kellners, the more the city lost its grip on what was real. And what came next would force the community to ask an unthinkable question. What if you can no longer trust what your eyes are telling you? Either Heinrich was exceptionally well informed, or something far stranger was happening. The sweltering summer of 1873 slowed business to a crawl and dulled social perception, creating the perfect backdrop for the inexplicable to slip by unnoticed. It was during this haze of heat and routine that the first unsettling rumors about the Kellner brothers began to circulate. The first major incident took place on August 15th during a private meeting at the Cotton Exchange, where Savannah's leading merchants had gathered to plan the fall cotton season. Around 10 a.m., Samuel Peaton noticed Heinrich Kellner seated quietly at the back, taking notes with keen attention despite not being on the guest list. Clad in a dark business suit, Heinrich followed the discussion as if he were not just informed, but intimately involved. Peaton discreetly asked how Heinrich had gained access and received 3 conflicting answers. Banker Robert Morrison, merchant Theodore Farnsworth, and shipping agent Dr. Edmund Carras all claimed to have invited him after morning meetings. The problem? Each described meeting Heinrich in different locations at nearly the same time. Morrison insisted their discussion about commercial loans occurred at Planter's Bank at 8:30 a.m. Farnsworth swore he reviewed cargo insurance with Heinrich at the shipping office at 8:45. Dr. Carras maintained they spoke about medical investments at 9:00. All 3 gave identical descriptions: same height, same build, same tailored wool suit despite the heat, same slight German accent, and the same uncanny grasp of their individual business concerns. Inside the cotton exchange, Heinrich approached several attendees and referenced private matters no outsider should have known. He casually assured Morrison that recent gold shipments had arrived safely, information known only to a handful of bank officials. He asked Farnsworth about a contract dispute resolved that very morning behind closed doors. But the most chilling encounter came when Heinrich approached Colonel William Vandenberg and said, "Colonel, I trust your Charleston business arrangements are proceeding smoothly. It would be unfortunate if complications arose with such profitable ventures." Vandenberg turned pale. Those dealings were both confidential and potentially ruinous, discussed only in private out-of-state meetings. By the meeting's end, the attendees had compared notes and realized something was horribly off. Heinrich had somehow conducted in-depth business meetings with several people in different locations, all at overlapping times. That evening, a hastily convened group of alarmed businessmen referred to the phenomenon as the German situation. Some feared they were losing their grip on reality. Others suspected something darker. Sheriff Marcus Redmond was brought in. Initially skeptical, he could no longer write it off as competition-fueled hysteria or anti-immigrant sentiment once he reviewed the witness statements. On August 20th, Redmond launched an investigation and began direct surveillance of the Kellners. What he found only deepened the mystery. The brothers' schedules were physically impossible. Deputy James Fairfax saw Heinrich leave the Bull Street residence at 8:00 a.m. and enter the cotton exchange by 9:00, where he remained for 2 hours. Yet at that same time, Redmond received credible reports placing Heinrich at the bank and the shipping office. Either these witnesses were all lying, or Heinrich was in 3 places at once. On August 25th, Sheriff Redmond decided to confront the family. He arrived at their Bull Street home and was welcomed into a parlor decorated with fine European furnishings and shelves of business correspondence. Klaus Kellner received him with a polite smile. "Sheriff Redmond," he said, in measured, accented English, "I understand there have been misunderstandings regarding my son's activities. I'm sure any confusion can be cleared up." Klaus Kellner told Sheriff Redmond with a polite smile. But when the sheriff asked to speak with all 4 sons, Klaus hesitated. "My boys maintain very demanding schedules, Sheriff. They're currently engaged in various appointments across the city. Yet within 30 minutes, all 4 brothers returned, each arriving separately, but within minutes of one another. During questioning, their answers were not just similar, they were synchronized." Heinrich, calm and composed, explained, "We maintain detailed schedules to avoid overlapping efforts. Coordinating efficiently is essential to prevent confusion among our clients." But Sheriff Redmond saw something beneath the surface. The brothers communicated in subtle ways, brief glances, tiny gestures, and near-invisible nods that seemed to carry full conversations without a word spoken. Their answers aligned so precisely with witness accounts that it was as if they had memorized every possible scenario. Each brother responded with perfect clarity about events that should have conflicted, explaining away contradictions with ease. The sheriff decided to press the point. Mr. Heinrich, multiple credible witnesses saw you at the cotton exchange between 9 and 11 this morning. Yet others say you were at the shipping office at the exact same time. How do you explain that? Heinrich didn't flinch. Sheriff people often confuse dates. Business meetings tend to blur together. I'm sure if you speak with them again, you'll find our schedule aligns perfectly. But Redmond had already verified the timeline. These meetings had occurred simultaneously. As suspicions deepened, the sheriff expanded his investigation. Under quiet surveillance, his team monitored the Kellners' movements and studied their routines. What they uncovered defied explanation. The brothers' coordination went far beyond familial closeness. They operated with the precision of a well-drilled espionage unit. Inside Klaus Kellner's private study, Redmond discovered business letters filled with odd language references to client profiles, security thresholds, and opportunity routes. It read less like commerce and more like covert planning. Even more disturbing were personal dossiers on prominent Savannah families detailing daily habits, financial vulnerabilities, social ties, and confidential secrets. Information that could only be gathered through persistent targeted surveillance. What had first appeared as an ambitious merchant family now looked more like a covert intelligence ring operating under the guise of legitimate business. The Kellner brothers weren't just well prepared, they were executing a form of psychological warfare, using their identical appearance and perfect communication to infiltrate elite circles, gather intel, and subtly manipulate outcomes. Then came the breakthrough. Deputy Fairfax, stationed across town, observed something impossible while Heinrich entered a meeting at the cotton exchange. Another man identical in appearance and dress walked into the shipping office just 3 blocks away at the exact same moment. Both men moved with Heinrich's same mannerisms, down to the tilt of the head and the way he adjusted his cuffs. It wasn't supernatural. It was strategy. The Kellner brothers had turned their physical uniformity into a weapon. By dividing roles, replicating speech patterns, and sharing critical information, they made it seem as though one man existed in many places at once. And no one, not even seasoned lawmen, had been able to tell the difference. What the sheriff had uncovered was not merely a deception. It was a coordinated system of identity manipulation, executed with such precision that it shattered the boundaries of what people believed was possible. To outsiders, it seemed like one man was conducting an inhuman volume of business. But the Kellner brothers' scheme went far beyond mere impersonation. They had engineered a system so refined, so disturbingly methodical, that it blurred the line between collaboration and collective identity. By meticulously recording every conversation, observation, and relationship, the brothers created a shared database of intelligence, allowing each to speak fluently about meetings they had never attended. Sheriff Redmond's investigation revealed the depth of their coordination. Each brother had a designated focus. Heinrich handled banking and finance tracking loans, investments, and monetary transfers. Wilhelm managed intelligence on shipping and logistics, monitoring cargo manifests, dock schedules, and warehouse operations. Friedrich specialized in social surveillance, embedding himself in Savannah's elite gatherings to gather whispers of scandal, marital strife, and family secrets. Gustav the Quietist managed the records and orchestrated the system, analyzing data and identifying targets for manipulation. But perhaps most unsettling was their recruitment network. The brothers had been quietly enlisting members of Savannah's working-class household servants, bank clerks, dock hands, delivery boys. In exchange for small payments, these informants reported on their employers' routines, relationships, and vulnerabilities. The result was an intelligence web that gave the Kellners advanced knowledge of business deals, personal conflicts, and financial instability, long before those affected even knew they were exposed. This information gave them leverage in negotiations, influence at social events, and power within a community that never suspected it was being watched. But Redmond's growing case file suggested a darker intent. Hidden documents in Klaus Kellner's study revealed plans far beyond surveillance. The brothers were identifying targets for robbery, blackmail, and fraud. Families who kept cash in safes, merchants with exploitable weaknesses, individuals with reputations built on secrets, they were all cataloged with chilling precision. And on October 10th, 1873, Redmond's worst fears were realized. That night, Colonel Augustus Vandenberg hosted a private dinner at his mansion, an affair attended by the upper crust of Savannah's business class. While guests dined and drank, someone infiltrated the colonel's private study. Without breaking a lock, the intruder opened a concealed safe and removed only specific contents, confidential business documents, incriminating letters, and sensitive financial records. Jewelry and silver worth far more were left untouched. The theft was discovered the next morning. They knew exactly what to take, Vandenberg told Redmond. Documents that could destroy my name if they became public. They left everything else. Whoever did this knew my affairs better than my partners do. What chilled Redmond further was what guests recalled. Several reported encountering one of the Kellner brothers, despite no member of the German family being on the guest list. Mrs. Adelaide Whitman Vandenberg's sister-in-law remembered him clearly. A polite German gentleman, she said. He moved easily through the rooms, greeting everyone like an old friend. He asked the most insightful questions about Papa's business, seemed genuinely fascinated by how everything worked. That wasn't charm, it was reconnaissance. The Kellner brothers weren't just exploiting Savannah, they were dissecting it. Piece by piece. With every question, every interaction, they were gathering ammunition. And now, with a major robbery executed flawlessly under the nose of Savannah's elite, the city's most powerful citizens were no longer simply subjects of curiosity. They were targets. But as more guests came forward, Sheriff Redmond uncovered a disturbing pattern. Multiple witnesses described encounters with the same man, Heinrich Kellner, in different parts of the Vandenberg mansion during the same time frame. The butler saw him in the kitchen, casually inquiring about staff routines. The groundskeeper recalled a brief conversation near the stables, where the German gentleman asked about security patrols. Upstairs, several guests claimed he was admiring family portraits, when in truth he was studying the house's layout. Redmond quickly realized the Kellner brothers hadn't just infiltrated the dinner party. They had used it as a coordinated reconnaissance mission. While one brother mingled downstairs, others mapped the property and identified vulnerabilities. The robbery that followed hadn't been a crime of opportunity. It was a surgical strike, the product of meticulous planning. The thieves had known exactly where the colonel's hidden safe was located, the correct combination, and which documents were most damaging. They bypassed valuables that would have slowed them down because the documents were the true prize. This level of precision required months of structured surveillance, not casual observation. Over the next few weeks, a wave of similarly executed crimes swept through Savannah. Wealthy families were robbed with startling accuracy. Confidential business dealings were exposed to competitors. Anonymous letters demanding payment in exchange for silence began to circulate among the city's elite. It was clear the Kellner brothers had weaponized their intelligence network. They weren't eccentric merchants. They were predators operating with calculated precision and a terrifying grasp of their environment. Sheriff Redmond decided to fight strategy with strategy. He leaked carefully crafted rumors about an upcoming party hosted by a fictitious merchant family, supposedly planning to showcase rare and valuable jewelry. He then positioned deputies across the city to watch for any signs of Kellner surveillance. What unfolded confirmed his worst fears. On the night of the staged event, deputies reported seeing Heinrich Kellner in 4 different locations at the same time. One saw him loitering near the decoy house, appearing to scout the grounds. Another spotted him at the train station, purchasing a ticket for a late departure. A third observed him at the docks, speaking with ship captains. And a fourth saw him in a tavern near the German district in conversation with known criminal associates. Each description was identical, same clothes, same gait, same face. It was physically impossible. Yet the sightings were indisputable. The Kellner brothers had perfected their illusion, stretching the limits of identity and alibi. Sheriff Redmond knew he was facing a criminal force unlike anything local law enforcement was prepared to handle. On November 15, 1873, Redmond called for reinforcements. Detective Inspector William Carrington of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency arrived in Savannah with a mandate to dismantle what was now known as the Impossible Brothers case. Carrington came equipped with methods far ahead of their time: early photographic records, strategic surveillance routines, and a clear command structure. His first priority was to solve what no one else could observe: all four brothers at once. He divided his team of 6 Pinkerton agents into rotating shifts. 2 agents would remain stationed at the Kellner residence at all times, while the others tailed each brother across the city. For the first time, law enforcement had the resources to map the brothers' movements in real time. And after just 3 days, the breakthrough came. On the morning of November 18th, Agent Thomas Burke, watching from a rooftop on Bull Street with a telescope, saw Heinrich leave the Kellner residence at 8:15 a.m., dressed in a dark blue coat and carrying a leather portfolio. At the exact same time, Agent Michael Donovan, stationed near the Cotton Exchange 12 blocks away, watched Heinrich enter the building in identical attire on time for a scheduled 8:45 meeting. "It's impossible," Burke told Carrington that evening. "I watched him leave the house at 8:15. Donovan swears he entered the Cotton Exchange at 8:15. The distance makes that physically unfeasible, but Carrington wasn't surprised. As the agents compared notes, a chilling pattern emerged. The Kellner brothers were operating on synchronized schedules so exact that they could create the illusion of bilocation. One brother would begin a journey at 8:15. Another, already at the destination, would appear as if arriving at that same moment. When carefully timed and precisely coordinated, the illusion was seamless. And to a city still rebuilding its faith in order and trust, it was terrifying. During the same 30-minute window when Heinrich was seen leaving the Kellner house, Wilhelm would arrive at the shipping office dressed identically down to the dark coat and the leather portfolio. Detective Carrington soon realized the Kellners weren't simply relying on their identical appearance. They were replicating everything: clothing, accessories, even props, to ensure that witnesses, when later questioned, would describe the same man in multiple places with perfect consistency. The leather portfolio, for instance, was a carefully rotated item. Carried by Heinrich in the morning, it would later appear in Wilhelm's hands, allowing the illusion of continuity throughout the day. But this deception extended far beyond appearance. Carrington's agents uncovered a communications network so advanced it bordered on military-grade intelligence work. Hidden surveillance posts revealed that the brothers used street vendors, messenger boys, and domestic workers to relay real-time updates between locations. One such courier, young Timothy Boswell, was spotted ferrying folded notes between the brothers' various appointments. Undercover agent Sarah Mitchell, posing as a potential client, learned from Timothy's employer that the boy had been paid extra to memorize overheard details and deliver them to specific addresses. He wasn't just running messages, he was an information node in a covert surveillance network. But the most chilling discovery was how the Kellners used this intelligence to craft airtight alibis. On November 20th, Agent Donovan tracked Heinrich through a 2-hour meeting at the Cotton Exchange. At the same time, Agent Burke recorded Wilhelm visiting multiple shops along Broughton Street, each shopkeeper convinced they had spoken with Heinrich Kellner. Carrington noted the pattern in his log. Wilhelm is actively generating alibis for Heinrich. While Heinrich conducts official documented business, Wilhelm creates a trail of eyewitnesses prepared to defend his innocence. And the stakes were rising. 2 days later, on November 22nd, the Peaton residence was burglarized with surgical precision. Mrs. Evangeline Peaton reported that her jewelry box had been opened using a key that fit perfectly. No damage, no noise. The thief took only the most valuable pieces, ignoring bulkier items that would have slowed escape. It was a job that required intimate knowledge of the home and its routines. Yet Heinrich had a solid alibi. He had been present at a Public Merchants Association meeting during the entire window of the robbery, surrounded by over 30 prominent businessmen. Dozens could vouch for his presence. But Carrington saw through it. The burglary hadn't required Heinrich. It only needed someone who looked like him. One of the brothers had committed the crime while another built the alibi. Determined to force a crack in the facade, Carrington set a trap. On November 25th at precisely 2 p.m., Sheriff Redmond arrived at the Kellner home with a warrant to question Heinrich about the Peaton burglary. Simultaneously, Agent Burke was stationed at the shipping office, where Heinrich, according to the schedule, was set to attend a business meeting. Both encounters occurred exactly as planned. Heinrich appeared calm and cooperative at the house, providing a full account of his whereabouts and confidently discussing the public meeting. Yet Agent Burke observed an identical man dressed the same, behaving the same, actively participating in the shipping office discussion across town at the same moment. Either Heinrich Kellner has mastered the ability to be in two places at once, Redmond told Carrington, or we are witnessing a deception unlike anything I've ever encountered. Carrington knew the truth. The brothers had perfected a system so seamless, so precise that each could impersonate another convincingly, even under direct scrutiny. But he also knew such complexity required constant communication and perfectly timed transitions. If disrupted at the right moment, the whole system could collapse. On December 1st, Carrington put his final plan into motion, designed to force the brothers into a situation where their carefully orchestrated illusion would break. The plan was brilliantly simple. Create 4 simultaneous high-pressure scenarios requiring each brother's personal presence. None could be delegated or delayed. On December 5th, at exactly 10 a.m., Sheriff Redmond arrived at the Kellner home with a warrant to search the premises, insisting all family members remain present. At the same moment, Agent Donovan, disguised as federal bank examiner Robert Hayes, confronted Heinrich at Planters Bank about suspicious financial records, demanding immediate answers. Agent Burke, posing as a customs inspector, appeared at the shipping office and cornered Wilhelm with questions about potential smuggling activities. Agent Mitchell, disguised as a court officer, summoned Friedrich to the courthouse for urgent testimony under threat of federal penalties. Each scenario was designed to be unavoidable. The brothers couldn't split themselves, couldn't delay, and couldn't avoid scrutiny. Carrington watched from his vantage point across Bull Street. As Redmond entered the house, all 4 brothers were indeed present. They greeted the sheriff and cooperated, showing documents and maintaining their usual synchronized demeanor. But Carrington noticed something new. The cracks were forming. Heinrich's hand trembled slightly as he handed over papers. Wilhelm kept glancing toward the window, calculating escape routes. Friedrich paced the room with unusual agitation. Gustav, usually silent and composed, fumbled over a routine response when asked about shipping records. The illusion was holding, but barely, and Carrington knew the next move could bring it crashing down. Friedrich, normally reserved, grew unusually talkative, volunteering information no one had asked for, rambling about shipping manifests and merchant accounts in a transparent attempt to control the room. Gustav said nothing, but his eyes darted constantly between his brothers and the lawman, tracking every movement with rising anxiety. Then the moment that shattered the illusion arrived. A messenger boy appeared at the front door, breathless with what he claimed were urgent business documents for Heinrich. The brothers exchanged a series of quick, meaningful glances. An unspoken conversation passed in fractions of a second. Almost immediately, Heinrich stood and announced he had to leave. "This appointment cannot be delayed," he insisted. "It's a matter of federal obligation." Sheriff Redmond stepped forward. "That's not possible. The warrant requires all residents to remain present during the search." Heinrich's face, always composed, now tightened with frustration. "Sheriff, you don't understand. I have legal obligations that supersede this warrant. Federal business takes priority." It was the first sign of open resistance and the first real crack in their perfectly synchronized facade. Over the next 2 hours, more messengers arrived with escalating urgency. Each new note added pressure, each request for Heinrich's presence somewhere else, fraying their composure further. The brothers began to slip. Wilhelm answered a question directed to Friedrich. Gustav responded when Heinrich was addressed. Their body language, once seamless, now betrayed subtle but telling differences. Tapping fingers, nervous glances, clenched jaws. By noon, the stress reached a breaking point. Agent Donovan, still posing as federal examiner, Robert Hayes, entered the Kellner home and delivered the final blow. "Mr. Kellner," he declared, "you are required by federal banking law to appear in person at Planters Bank within 1 hour to testify regarding serious financial violations. Failure to comply will result in federal warrants." Heinrich tried to push back, but desperation cracked through his words. "There must be some mistake. I have the documents here. I can provide anything you need. There's no reason I need to go anywhere." But Donovan didn't waver. "Federal law requires your personal presence at the institution where the transaction occurred, no exceptions." For the first time in their 18-month operation, the Kellner brothers didn't have an answer. Heinrich looked to his brothers for silent guidance, but no one responded. Their complex, wordless language, glances, nods, gestures was gone. All four stared at each other, isolated, exposed. It was Gustav who broke the silence. Quietly, without looking up, he said, "Sheriff, there's something we need to explain about our business methods." That single sentence brought the Kellner operation to its end and opened the door to one of the most extraordinary criminal confessions in American history. In the days that followed, each brother confessed in full, revealing a web of deception more sophisticated than anything the city or law enforcement had ever seen. Heinrich, the de facto leader, spoke at length with Detective Carrington, explaining the ideology behind their scheme. "We knew from the beginning that our identical appearance was a rare advantage," he said. "If people couldn't tell us apart, we could manipulate time, place, and identity. We could create airtight alibis. We could gather information no ordinary criminal could hope to access." Their arrival in Savannah, it turned out, had been planned for more than 2 years. They had studied the city through newspapers, court reports, and trade journals. They had corresponded with potential informants under assumed names. They had even sent advance scouts, temporary lodgers posing as European travelers, to quietly gather intel on Savannah's social elite law enforcement structure and security systems. "We chose Savannah," Heinrich explained, "because it was large enough to be profitable, but small enough that we could map its business and social network with precision. And frankly, we knew the police wouldn't have the resources to deal with something like us." Wilhelm detailed the mechanics of the deception. "We operated on a strict system of time coordination and immediate information sharing. Every meeting, every conversation, every interaction was recorded by hand and passed between us. Within minutes, each of us would know exactly what the others had said, heard, and observed. The brothers maintained massive handwritten logs, painstakingly detailed, obsessively organized. These files included personal habits, financial records, family tensions, and hidden scandals of nearly every prominent figure in the city. It was a dossier of Savannah's secrets, compiled not by accident, but by design. We weren't stealing," Friedrich added. "We were extracting, leveraging vulnerabilities, finding cracks." Carrington understood now the Kellners hadn't just exploited their physical resemblance. They had used it to create a distributed identity, a single persona existing in 4 bodies. An illusion so complete that even under scrutiny, it remained unbreakable until it cracked under the weight of its own perfection. And now, with full confessions in hand and the extent of the scheme laid bare, Savannah finally understood the chilling truth. The most dangerous criminals are not the ones who hide in shadows. They're the ones who look exactly like everyone you trust. The Kellner brothers' confessions unveiled a chilling truth. Their success had never relied on brute force or high-tech trickery, but on one simple principle: information is power. The more we knew about people's private lives, the more we could manipulate them, Wilhelm explained. We treated information like currency. People trusted us because we seemed to understand their business better than their own partners. Friedrich revealed the psychological core of their operation. People see what they expect to see, he told Detective Carrington. If someone believed they were meeting Heinrich, then I could be Heinrich. The mind fills in the details. Identity becomes a suggestion, not a fact. The brothers had studied human behavior like scientists. They analyzed facial expressions, voice patterns, and social dynamics. They developed leading questions that invited people to share secrets under the illusion of casual conversation. Most people want to talk about themselves, Friedrich said. All we had to do was listen and make them feel seen. Gustav's confession detailed the full extent of their criminal enterprise. Over 18 months, the Kellners had stolen approximately $78,000 in cash jewelry and sensitive documents, a staggering sum for the time. An additional $12,000 had been extorted through carefully orchestrated blackmail targeting Savannah's most respected families. But their success wasn't luck. It was the result of weeks of planning surveillance and psychological profiling. We never entered a home unless we'd studied it for weeks, Gustav explained. We knew the family's habits, their security routines, even the make and model of their safes. When we acted, it wasn't a gamble, it was a calculated operation. Even more troubling were the crimes that had not yet happened. The brothers had been escalating, preparing for bolder targets, a series of coordinated bank robberies, and more disturbingly, the planned abduction of children from wealthy families for ransom. We were running out of simple scores, Henrik admitted. Savannah was catching on. We needed larger payouts to justify the risk. That meant expanding into new cities and taking bigger chances. Carrington's investigation revealed that the Kellners were already laying groundwork in Charleston and Atlanta. They had begun developing new identities, recruiting local informants, and planning the next stage of their operation. But the trap sprung on December 5th shattered their timeline and their empire. The trial of the Kellner brothers began on February 20th, 1874, in Savannah's federal court. The proceedings captivated the public and made headlines across the state. For 6 weeks, the city held its breath as the nation watched the unraveling of one of the most calculated criminal conspiracies of the era. Judge Samuel Morrison presided over the case. Federal prosecutor Jonathan Hayes led the charge, building his argument around the brothers' systematic manipulation of identity, trust, and social perception. These defendants didn't simply steal, Hayes declared in his opening statement. They conducted a coordinated assault on the very foundation of community trust. Their crimes weren't just against individuals, they were against the idea of a shared reality. The defense, led by attorney Marcus Williams, conceded guilt, but tried to limit the scope. "My clients are guilty of deception," Williams said. "But this is not a criminal empire. These are individual acts of fraud, not a conspiracy that rises to the level of federal criminal enterprise." But the evidence told a different story. Seized journals and written logs from the Kellner home showed an operation more disciplined than most corporations. The records included schedules, personal profiles, surveillance notes, and internal communications that mapped the private lives of over 200 Savannah residents. Every interaction had been logged, every conversation analyzed, every weakness cataloged. After just 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict. Heinrich Wilhelm Friedrich and Gustav Kellner were found guilty on all charges: conspiracy, fraud, blackmail, burglary, and operating an organized criminal enterprise. Their convictions set a precedent for prosecuting psychological fraud and complex identity-based deception, a new frontier in American criminal law. And as they were led from the courtroom in chains, the message was clear: the greatest threat to justice isn't always violence. Sometimes it's the face that looks just familiar enough to trust. Judge Samuel Morrison handed down a sentence of 12 years for each Kellner brother, declaring that their crimes represented a new era of criminal sophistication that demanded equally severe consequences. These defendants have shown us that our assumptions about criminal behavior are outdated, he said during sentencing. Their calculated manipulation of human psychology and perception requires a new standard of law enforcement and a new category of justice. To prevent any future collaboration or escape attempts, the brothers were sent to separate federal penitentiaries. Heinrich and Wilhelm were released after 10 years, having earned 2 years reduction for good behavior and their cooperation with ongoing investigations. Friedrich, unrepentant and silent beyond his initial confession, served his full term. Gustav, the quietest and most psychologically fragile of the four, died in prison in 1881 from tuberculosis, never adjusting to the isolation and control of incarceration. What became of the surviving brothers is a mystery in itself. After their release, Heinrich and Wilhelm vanished, likely under assumed identities. No verifiable trace of their post-prison lives was ever found. Friedrich returned to Germany and, according to authorities, lived a quiet, uneventful life. Yet over the following decades, law enforcement occasionally investigated new cases uncanny in similarity that raised the question, had the Kellner legacy truly ended? Of the estimated $90,000 the brothers had stolen, roughly $35,000 was recovered through their cooperation and Carrington's tracing of financial networks. The rest, converted into gold, hidden in caches, and protected by silence, was never found. Many families never saw their valuables again. But the case's true legacy lived beyond the stolen wealth. Detective William Carrington's methods, his systematic surveillance, forensic interviews, and multi-agency coordination became a model for law enforcement across the Southeast. His playbook for dismantling complex deception schemes influenced investigative practices for decades, earning him a national reputation as one of the most capable criminal investigators of the 19th century. The Kellner case also reshaped how local and federal agencies work together. It exposed the limits of fragmented jurisdiction in the face of criminals who exploited those very gaps. In response, new protocols were established to improve cross-jurisdictional coordination standards that still echo in modern investigations today. Sheriff Marcus Redmond, deeply affected by the case, spent the remainder of his career pursuing similar crimes. But none matched the Kellners' level of discipline and precision. The brothers' tactics became a benchmark, a litmus test for criminal complexity. Their story entered police academies as a case study in deception, manipulation, and identity fraud. The Bull Street house where the family once lived was eventually sold to a reputable merchant family. But in Savannah, its legacy remained. Locals whispered of strange occurrences and unsettling echoes within those walls. Over time, the house became folklore, a symbol of charm, mystery, and quiet menace. The legend of the German brothers became embedded in Savannah's cultural memory, passed from generation to generation. And beneath the historical record lies an unsettling truth. The Kellner brothers succeeded because they looked respectable. They wore fine suits, spoke the language of commerce, and offered friendship laced with curiosity. They were given access not because they forced their way in, but because they were invited. Their story is a haunting reminder that the most dangerous criminals often look exactly like the people we trust. They didn't break in, they were let in. So, what do you think? Could such a scheme still work in our modern world? Or would digital surveillance and facial recognition make it impossible? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your theories. And if this tale of deception and identity fascinated you, make sure to subscribe, tap that notification bell, and share this story with your fellow true crime enthusiasts. Because sometimes the most disturbing truths aren't about what people do in secret, but how easily they convince us they belong. See you in the next video.